Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. In ancient Chinese imperial palaces, concubines lived in splendid attire and enjoyed countless favors. Yet once they transgressed palace rules or became entangled in power struggles, they could not escape the fate of being sentenced to death. Historical records document this fate in great detail, with the method of execution being particularly striking. Folk legends often romanticize the notion of bestowed poison wine, suggesting that a concubine merely lifts her crimson lips, takes one sip, and then slowly closes her eyes, with perhaps a single droplet of blood at the corner of her mouth, seeming both tragic and composed. However, the historical reality is far removed from such a picturesque image. The actual poison wine was extremely potent. Upon consumption, it would typically inflict excruciating pain, cause uncontrollable convulsions, and lead to horrifying symptoms, hardly a peaceful death by any measure. In contrast, death by white silk band was far more ceremonial and dignified, and it came to be regarded as the superior method for preserving one's final dignity. The popular tales of bestowed poison wine are often depicted in an exquisitely tragic manner. The concubine holds a delicate cup, drinks with a faint smile, and her eyes shimmer with the sorrow of parting, as if foretelling a poetic demise. Yet historical records of the effects of poison wine reveal a far more brutal reality. After ingesting the poison wine, a concubine would quickly experience severe pain, sometimes accompanied by convulsions and frothing at the mouth. The entire process was fraught with extreme physical suffering and undeniable disarray. Consequently, both within and beyond the palace walls, this method of execution was widely criticized for its lack of dignity and its failure to preserve the once glorious image of the concubine. By contrast, death by white silk band emphasized a composed process and a dignified outcome. Historical accounts indicate that concubines sentenced to death by white silk band often, during their hanging, would gently press their tongues against their palates to prevent the tongue from protruding, thus allowing their features to retain a semblance of grace. According to sources such as the History of Ming and the Veritable Records of Qing, the palace's requirements for the execution ceremonies of concubines were not solely punitive but were also intended to uphold the dignity of the imperial house and the image of the harem. Facing the ultimate threshold between life and death, many concubines chose death by white silk band as a final means to preserve their self-respect in the midst of despair. Wang Guifei was one of the favored consorts during the Jiajing era of the Ming dynasty. According to the History of Ming, she originally came from humble origins but quickly won the favor of the Jiajing emperor through her talent and gentle demeanor, eventually becoming one of the most beloved figures in the palace. She accompanied the emperor through countless hardships, and her beauty and wisdom were renowned throughout the capital. However, political circumstances shifted, and the internal intrigues of the palace grew ever more intense. In 1521, early in his reign, the Jiajing emperor, seeking to stabilize his administration and heeding the counsel of his ministers, ordered the execution of several concubines. Wang Guifei, implicated in palace secrets, was among those condemned. In the face of this sudden calamity, though her heart was filled with reluctance, Wang Guifei understood that choosing poison wine would inevitably subject her to unbearable pain and strip her of the composure she once possessed. Resolutely, she rejected the cruel poison wine and opted instead for death by white silk band. It is said that on that fateful night, under a cold, clear moon, Wang Guifei stood alone in the long corridor of the palace, dressed in plain attire with a calm expression. She retrieved the immaculate white silk band, gently tied it around her neck, and meticulously adjusted her makeup so that her features retained a measure of dignity. In that silent farewell, she ended her life by hanging herself, preserving her grace even in death. During the Kangxi period of the Qing dynasty, palace intrigues continued to swirl. Hui Fei, long favored by the Kangxi emperor for her intelligence and gentle nature, found herself ensnared in a scandal involving confidential palace matters. In 1694, a sudden scandal erupted over secrets within the palace, and Hui Fei was accused of leaking sensitive information, resulting in her being sentenced to death. The veritable records of Qing briefly recount that Hui Fei was condemned for involvement in confidential matters. Despite her commendable character, she could not escape the emperor's decree. In the days leading up to her execution, Hui Fei was acutely aware that she was merely a pawn in the power struggles of the court. Facing such unforeseen misfortune, she did not choose the painful poison wine. Instead, she steadfastly opted for death by white silk band to preserve her final dignity. It is said that on the morning of her execution, accompanied by ministers, Hui Fei was escorted to a secluded, tranquil courtyard. The courtyard, with its ancient trees and gently flowing water, exuded a serene atmosphere. Clad in simple yet elegant attire and with a calm expression, she took out the pristine white silk band and slowly tied it around her neck. With the careful assistance of her maid, she adjusted the band to ensure that, at the moment of her execution, she maintained a noble bearing. With a soft, final sigh, Hui Fei silently bid farewell to the mortal world in that secluded courtyard. Also during the Kangxi era, Kang Fei, another consort once celebrated for her exceptional talent and beauty, won the emperor's favor. However, due to the crime of adultery, Kang Fei could not escape the long arm of the law. Rumors circulated throughout the palace, and in order to uphold moral standards and propriety, the court ultimately decreed her execution. Although historical records regarding Kang Fei are relatively brief, they do contain accounts of her emotional entanglements and moral transgressions. Confronted with these severe accusations and aware that she could not defend herself, Kang Fei made a fateful decision under the weight of destiny. She refused the exceedingly cruel method of poison wine, believing that it would not only subject her to extreme pain in her final moments but also obliterate the grace and charm she had once embodied. Instead, Kang Fei chose to die by white silk band, intending to bid farewell to the world in a ritualistic and dignified manner. Legend has it that on the day of her execution, Kang Fei sat quietly in a side hall of the palace, with the moonlight casting gentle shadows through the window. A maid discreetly handed her a white silk band, and with her eyes lowered in a mix of longing for past affections and resigned acceptance of her fate, she gently tied the band. In that moment, it seemed as though she transformed all her inner turmoil and regret into silence, calmly embracing the end of her life. During the prosperous reign of the Qianlong Emperor, palace intrigues continued unabated. Hui Fei, known for her intelligence and beauty, had once deeply won the favor of the emperor. However, in 1748, a scandal involving accusations of witchcraft quietly emerged. Hui Fei was accused of employing secret methods to meddle in state affairs and disrupt the established order. Although this charge remains a subject of controversy in historical records, in order to safeguard imperial authority and maintain order, the Qianlong Emperor ordered Hui Fei's execution. The draft history of Qing briefly records the incident, attesting to its significance. Facing this sudden accusation, Hui Fei was fully aware of the peril in which she found herself, yet she steadfastly upheld her inner dignity. She refused the agonizing method of poison wine and resolutely chose death by white silk band. Prior to her execution, it is said that Hui Fei wandered alone in the palace gardens, silently recalling memories of her past. At that time, the garden was lush with blooming flowers and towering trees, and a gentle stream flowed nearby, a setting that, despite its serenity, could not mask the sorrow in her heart. Accompanied by palace attendants, Hui Fei was escorted to a secluded courtyard. Clad in plain clothing with an expression that conveyed both determination and melancholy, she retrieved the white silk band she always carried, gently caressing the soft fabric as if reminiscing about her once glorious past. Then, slowly, she wrapped the band around her neck. With the meticulous assistance of her maid, she ensured that even in death, her countenance retained a measure of dignity and calm. In this ritualistic manner, Hui Fei brought her tumultuous life to an end. The tragic stories of Wang Guifei, Hui Fei, Kang Fei, and Qi Fei, though set against different backgrounds and involving various charges, all illustrate a common theme. In the final moments of their lives amid the turbulent palace intrigues of the Ming and Qing dynasties, these consorts chose to end their lives by white silk band in order to preserve their final dignity. Historical records reveal that the ancients regarded beauty and dignity as indispensable aspects of life. Even in its final moments, one must strive to retain a trace of elegance. Whether it was Wang Guifei's serene farewell, reminiscent of a celestial maiden under the moon, Hui Fei's quiet, resigned smile in a tranquil courtyard, Kang Fei's complex sorrow born of emotional entanglements, or Qi Fei's final act of resistance amid the tumult of witchcraft accusations, they all employed the white silk band as a means to leave behind their last vestiges of dignity and beauty. Their stories not only document the brutal realities of palace power struggles but also showcase the steadfastness and composure of ancient women in the face of fate. Although the historical accounts are scattered and sometimes brief, one can discern that the immaculate white silk band, wound around the necks of these women, symbolizes their eternal pursuit of beauty and dignity. As reflected in sources such as the History of Ming, the veritable records of Qing, and other historical texts, the rigorous requirements for the execution ceremonies of concubines in ancient palaces were not only a manifestation of strict imperial control but also served as a cultural means of preserving the final image of the women in the harem. Whether due to political intrigue, involvement in confidential matters, moral failings, or accusations of witchcraft, the consorts who faced execution chose to end their lives with a white silk band, a choice that has since become an important subject in discussions of palace fate. This method of execution not only reveals the merciless collision of power and destiny but also allows later generations to perceive that even in the depths of despair, dignity and composure can still shine forth. History flows onward, those resplendent beauties of the palace, though their fates differed, all used a white silk band in their final moments to compose elegies of sorrow and resolve. Their stories have become eternal memories, and as we reflect upon that era, we cannot help but lament that in an age rife with power struggles and strict ceremonial codes, even when confronted with inevitable death, some were able to confront their destiny with dignity and composure. It is precisely these elegies that form one of the most poignant and thought-provoking chapters of ancient Chinese palace culture, etched forever on the stone walls of history and destined to provoke endless contemplation and reflection. This is History and Culture channel. Like and subscribe are the biggest help and support for us. Thank you everyone. See you next time.